Hey, everybody. Hey. Thank you guys so much for tonight. So good. I just want to tell all of you guys who are here before we jump in is to say thank you for what you mean to our church. I've been doing this a long time, and the longer I do it, the more sappy I get, but also the more hopeful I am because of what is available for the church. And you guys being a part of this place here on Tuesday nights, but also what you guys do throughout the week in so many different places, brings a lot of hope to a lot of people, and it makes a profound difference in who we are and who we're becoming as a church. And so I do want to say thank you. We sang some things, and I think, I just heard the conference, I've heard Carson talk about it, but this idea of kingdom come. And we were singing these songs, right? Resurrection power over everything. Remember we just sang that? Remember? And we said, Jesus is already won. Do you ever wonder if resurrection power is over everything and he has already won, why things are so jacked up? You ever wonder that? No? You ever wrestle with how do we claim this in this? And what y'all are gonna be exploring, and this is so important, this idea of kingdom come, we're gonna talk about this in a little bit, how this works. But the way we experience resurrection power over everything, and the way we experience the victory that Jesus has already made available is, it happens in the faith of God's people. Not when we make things happen, when we believe and we trust and we walk in the things that we believe and we bring this to bear on the world around us. And kingdom come isn't a function of something there happening here. It's something there happening in you, and then you acting on that here. And that's where we got to get our heads and our hearts around it. It's so important. While we even talk about the practice of Sabbath and some of these other things we're going to look at tonight. So as we do, if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to two. We're finishing up Nehemiah. Carson's done a spectacular job in Nehemiah, right? Didn't he do a great job? Nehemiah's a crazy man. Just like Carson. And then last week, y'all got to hear from Grant. Did y'all enjoy Grant? Grant was really good. Now you got me tonight, so there we go. So Nehemiah is this idea of good work and on the wall, and Carson's done a great job kind of giving vision for that. Well, the thing about Nehemiah is I don't know if you've read the end, Nehemiah ends in kind of a train wreck. Nehemiah worked really, really hard to do this good work, and then when he comes back, he finds that his good work has been messed up. And he's ticked about it. And in fact, this is how the book of Nehemiah ends. In 13 chapters. So the middle chapters go through all these just lists of census and other things and genealogy. It's just a list of names. In the end, Nehemiah goes back to Babylon and he's trying to sort some things out. And he comes back and everything that he's worked for is now a mess. And this is how he responds to it. This could be some of your life verse, right? Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 25, it says this: I rebuked them, and I called curses down on them. I beat some of them in, and I pulled out their hair. Now, how's that? Here's the lesson, that sometimes you will work so hard, and what you're gonna feel like you wanna do is beat some people up and pull people's hair out. That's kind of the moral, the lesson of Nehemiah. And what I wanna draw from in this, because at the very end, Nehemiah just sort of sits down, and he's like, Lord, could you just remember me with some measure of favor? Could you just take what I've offered, and maybe it'll be something or mean something to you? It's just this hopeful, almost desperate posture. I think this is really important for us, for where we begin from, because what Nehemiah was so ticked off about, and what he was so upset about, is they had taken this temple space, right? The temple and the wall that was built to create this place, this temple space where God's will and God's intention would rule and people would respond accordingly. And people didn't tend to the ordering of this. It was about Sabbath and some of these other rules. It was about, and a lot of it has to do with the Sabbath and not honoring the ordering that God has. And I'm not talking about order like organization. I'm talking about ordering the way you arrange your life in order to participate in the way God has intended us to live. So most of our lives aren't ordered, right, to participate in the way that God intends for us to live. We are driven by so many other pressures and so many other things, and a lot of them are valid. So suppose tonight I told you, hey, it's already Wednesday. Some of you are like panicked because you got a paper due on Wednesday, and tonight's like Tuesday night. You get to do what you want to do until that paper's due, or until whatever it is that's happening that you have to do. And a lot of times when we think about time rushing ahead, we get so stressed out and so worried and so anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow. That's because we are disordered. There's an arrangement that we need to recalibrate and understand and reorient ourselves to in this. A lot of the practices we talk about, the posture of a quiet time, the posture of reading scripture, the posture of worship, are all designed to be reorienting to us, to reorient us from the way in which this world operates and to reorient us into the way that God has intended for us to live, and then to bring some of that on in heaven here on earth. Right? That's the whole posture of why we do these things, to develop these practices, to reorient ourselves to the way in which God intends us to live so that can actually be experienced in some measure, imperfectly so, here. And so when I'm talking about this on Sunday, I've been talking about money in our church very differently than what most people are used to. But it's interesting that so much of the old covenant rules and laws are all economic in nature. They have to do with work. Most of us have this idea when we talk about the Sabbath, that the Sabbath is something different than work. It's like in our world, right? You have the work week, which is where you go to school. It's where you go to work. It's where you do all the things you're supposed to do. And when you grow up, it's where you do all the adulting, and you only do it because you're obligated to. And if you adult well, you get to have the weekend for yourself and do whatever you want to do. On those things, they're kind of disconnected. But in the original ordering of this, Sabbath was a fundamental part of the created order. Throughout the Old Covenant, what you see over and over again is honor the Sabbath, make the Sabbath a delight, honor the Sabbath, honor the Sabbath. And it's not just in the Big Ten, it's throughout the Old Testament. And here we find it again in Nehemiah. What he was ticked about is they were marketing and they were working on the Sabbath. And the reason people do this, the reason you do the things that you do is because you think in doing so, you're going to be able to get ahead. If you do this faster or you do it with more, do it more efficiently or more effectively, you work harder, you're going to get ahead of other people. You're going to sort of make things happen. And what it is, it's the illusion of control. So here's kind of what happened to me. And Carson, you've done a great job of setting up some definitions, setting up some things. I've been able to listen to most of the first and all of the second one. So tonight I'm going to try to wrap this up. When it talks about work, right, the word we use is vocation. And most people believe that's your job or the job that you will do. You work at Chick-fil-A or you work at whatever it is that you do. And that's not the biblical word for vocation. Vocation is your calling. It's it's your purpose, what you're put here to do. And what a lot of people, especially from my generation, what a lot of people I see who are my age, they think that what they do in the workforce, God doesn't care about because it's not ministry. And that's not at all how God sees this, nor how it's laid out for us. There's nothing inherently more spiritual about working at a church than there is anywhere else. Because if God has asked you to do something and called you to do something and created you to do something, then by its very nature, by its very essence, it is actually a spiritual thing. It's a vocation. It's a calling. And God can call people to all kinds of things. We need business leaders. We need people who have great minds and can think and create and contribute in financial markets and all the places. We need people. We need you doing the things you're doing because you're not studying theology or something like that. Maybe you're studying chemistry. I just met a chemistry guy over here. So God bless your heart, right? But all those things, right? God has put you here and he's given you these inclinations for reasons. And what I can assure you is this, you do not understand them yet. You don't. I meet college students all the time. I say, hey man, what year are you? I'm a senior. What do you want to do when you get out of school? And they always apologize. Well, I don't really know. I'm like, you know what the great news is? I'm 53 years old and I still have no idea what I want to do with my life, right? It is okay. It is an illusion to think you're going to have everything figured out by the time you're 22 or 23 or 24 years old and then execute it on the rest of your life. This was my story. So when I grew up, I was in college. I studied architecture. I started off being an English major because have you ever seen Dead Poets Society? Okay, 4 of y'all. Captain, my captain. Anyway, if you don't know it, that's why I wanted to be an English teacher. That lasted about 2 semesters, but I really wanted to be an architect. So transferred, went to architecture school. And all the while I'm in architecture school, I had this inkling that I was supposed to be in ministry. There's only one real major problem with that is I had no interest in being in ministry. The one thing that I knew coming into college is I did not want to work for a church. My dad worked for a church. I saw what that was like. I did not want to do it. Besides, I wanted to be rich, and working in a church was not the path to that. So that was a whole thing me and God had to sort out. And we did in all kinds of ways. So I'm in college, And I'm wrestling with life. I'm in architecture school, and I had a job in architecture, and I recognized this is a really good career path, and there's a lot of places where I think I could do really well. And so this is starting to entice me, and I'm still doing my quiet time and trying to read my Bible and listening to doing the things that you guys are doing. And so I'm doing this, and all the while I keep thinking like I'm supposed to be in the ministry. And so that led me to believe, like, Lord, if I'm gonna stop being an architect and go in the ministry, I better really believe what this is about. So I just went on a deep dive and tried to understand and learn as much as I could and say, okay, Lord, do I really believe in what you're saying and what Jesus did and all those things as much as I could as a 19, 18, 20-year-old. And so I did that. And then what I started doing is, okay, if I'm going to the ministry, here's what I gotta do. I gotta get out of school as fast as I can, right? Because the faster you get out of school, the faster you get to seminary, the faster you get through seminary, the faster you can start doing real ministry, right? Makes just perfect sense. So I began to calculate this, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pick the easiest major that I can get out of school fastest in. So I start looking around, and I picked one of the majors, and I thought I'm gonna change my major. Architecture school was 5 years. Most everything else was like 4. And so I do this, and basically, make a long story short, I'm in my room, and I'm praying. I was like, Lord, what do you want to do? And I say heard God. I don't want to make it sound more spiritual than it was. It was just like, I had a hunch that I'm not supposed to take the shortcut. I just need to stay in architecture school. And I have no idea why. I'm like, oh, this makes no sense. So I get through architecture school, and what happened in that whole journey is it only made me want to be an architect more. And now I'm really questioning God. God, if you want to be in the ministry, why don't you just do this? Then I would have hated that major, and ministry would have been my only option. But now I've studied this, I've done this, I like this, and I want to do this. And now it seems to be this tug of war in between me. I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do. And so I take a job at a architecture firm in Fayetteville, Georgia, a very good job. Designing really cool big houses. It's a blast. I had just gotten married, and I have a very good salary. The good news is I didn't spend a single dime because we were living still like we were in college. So we didn't have any, we just had no debt, no nothing. So we're just making a bunch of money and doing this. And I volunteered as a youth pastor in my church. I'm thinking, this is best of both worlds, right? I got my architecture deal going on and I'm youth ministry deal going on. And if they don't like what I'm doing, they can't fire me because I don't work there anyway. This is an awesome thing. This is all what's happened in my head. And so this is going on. And then not only on top of that, I get selected to be a deacon in my church. Now, if you didn't grow up in a denomination, that didn't mean anything to you, but this was like a big deal. And I was like the youngest deacon in our church, in the history of our church. I was like 21 years old, 22 years old. And so everybody is like, Mike, we are so thankful you're doing what God wants you to do. So every morning I get to my office early because I was like studying to do messages for the youth group, and there was no internet, so you had to write them yourself. You couldn't like Google something and just spit it out like we do now. I'm just kidding, don't do that. That's the joke, but anyway. And so I'm reading my Bible, and it doesn't matter where I read. God is going, Mike, you're an idiot, and you're not doing what I've asked you to do. Like, did you ever see that verse in the Bible? It's like, it feels like no matter where you read, God's just telling you that whatever you're doing isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And it's just haunted me. So lo and behold, one other fact you need to understand. So I'm working at the architecture firm, I'm volunteers youth ministry, and on Saturday nights, I work in the back line at Chick-fil-A, Dwarf House in Riverdale. My wife is a waitress there, and so this was a great day. I used to give her a hard time, and so I'm back there working. And so one of my bosses, he's the vice president at Chick-fil-A. He says, hey, Mike, we got an opening in the real estate acquisition department. We need an architect to come and work for the corporate headquarters at Chick-fil-A. Of course this is God. You don't get any more Christian than Chick-fil-A. Right, this is like a ministry made in heaven. I get to be an architect, make good money, and work it, it's the whole thing. So because I knew I had some connections and I worked for the Chick-fil-A for 6 years, I got kind of shoot in, and their applications, again, this is before the internet, before you had to handwrite or type out your application was like 16 pages long, all the essays, and the essays were like, why do you want to work at Chick-fil-A? I'm like, oh, because our values align. Y'all love Jesus and I love Jesus, and your mission is to glorify God with everything. Right? I was this whole thing, why I want to work at Chick-fil-A. So I'm so stoked about going to this interview. So I get there, and before I do, I get to meet Truett Cathy, get to shake his hand. I go down and have lunch with the 2 architects. This is like a shoe-in. So I go to my interview. I take these little tests. I go to my interview, and I interviewed a guy named Cleve Kaiser. He is the head of human resources for Chick-fil-A. At the time, it was national. Now it's a much bigger organization. So I go down, I sit down with Cleve Kaiser, and I'm so excited. He was asking me why I want to work at Chick-fil-A. I'm gonna be like, I got the perfect Chick-fil-A answer. I was doodles, like before the cow, they had doodles, the chicken, I've been doodles, I've done it all. And this is what he said. He said, Mike, what do you think that God wants you to do with your life? And this has happened to me twice, but the words that came out of my mouth were not mine. He said, Mike, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I think God's calling me in the ministry. I'm like, whoa, get that back. And he said, well, what are you doing here interviewing Chick-fil-A? I was like, well, actually, I'm running from God. Like, this is not. So like the next little bit was basically just a therapy session for me for the next hour and a half, like trying to clean me up off the floor. And then I'm like, I guess I'm not getting the job. He said, no, you're not getting the job. This would be like disobedient to God. I'm like, well, could you like just make an exception? Well, I'm sure you've been disobedient before. It's like a win-win. And so this just kind of all gets undermined, and I can't figure out what in the world God is doing. Everything that I tried to do. After all the tension and all the forcing and trying to calculate, how is this now gonna work? I still don't have even a plan to get in the ministry because I had no options. And I could not figure out for the life of me how this is gonna, you ever feel like that? You're sitting where you are and you're trying to figure out how are you going to get to where God wants you to be, and you start calculating. You start calculating relationships. If I'm in this place and I meet this person, this thing happens and that'll happen. This will make perfect sense. Oh, God has got to be all over this. You ever do that? It's a fun game. So this was like 3 years of my life. And here's what I learned. 2 things I learned. Here's the first thing that I learned. That just because you cannot figure out how God is going to do something has no capacity on his ability to do it. Just because you can't understand has no bearing on God's capacity to do something. And oftentimes this is our problem. We think because we can't figure it out, there's no possible way for it to happen. And God, all the way behind us, right, has this way in which he can just orchestrate and do things in ways that you cannot even imagine. He is orchestrating things underneath and around in ways that you cannot see from where you are, nor can you even begin to understand them from where you are. And that is okay. It's called being human and not God. And the thing that God is doing is he's teaching us to trust. One of the things that happened, we're gonna look at this sort of a teaser from this passage. When Moses is in the wilderness, when God decides to bring his people into the promised land, he could have taken a straight shot 3 days, but he took 40 years. And there's all kinds of things where he teaches him. In one particular place, Moses is flipping out. He's like, God, I'm tired of this. And then God's basically like, well, you can go your own way, and I'll just sit back and let you go by yourself. You just go ahead and do what you want to do. And this is what Moses says to him. This is in Exodus 33. Moses says, Lord, if you don't go with us, we don't want to go. And here's what you learn. This is as you're wrestling with this, that God's presence is far more important than his direction. And so much of our prayer life and our ambition and our drive is to figure out what direction God wants for your life to go in and what things he wants you to do to direct you and to guide you. And what you have to come to believe is that his presence with you is far more important than his direction. He can lead you anywhere that he wants if you're in his presence. If he tells you things and instructs you on things, the odds of us calculating and manipulating them and doing what we're going to do anyway just get much, much higher. This is how we are intended to live with God, So this is how Carson defined work. I think this is a beautiful definition. He says it's to create beautiful, extraordinary, meaningful things that glorify God and help others experience Eden. To create beautiful things, right? Your life is designed to bring beauty into the world, to do extraordinary things. And I don't think this is like beyond stuff. It's things that aren't fueled by our own sourcing or our own ambition or our own efforts. It's that somehow what we offer to God aligns with his work, and then things are fruitful. Y'all, what you have walked into tonight is complete evidence of that. This is extraordinary only because God chose to do something. We just happen to step in a place and in a way and say, God, would you use us for something, whatever you would like, would you use us? We'll be faithful to you over the long haul. And it's extraordinary, and it helps others And I love this. It helps others experience Eden. And this is something that's gotten lost in the call of the church and in the role of discipleship. We think that we've long thought, I grew up like this, right? That the goal is to get people to make a decision so they go to heaven when we die. And what God is doing is going, no, I'm trying to get heaven and earth restored and returned the way I've intended for it to be. And this has been this way since the beginning. And this is what I mean by arrangement. In the beginning, Genesis chapter 1 is the very first page of the Bible. Carson said I've been doing Bible drills here. It's the very first page, so it's easy to find. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and now the earth was formless and void, and the darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the deep. It's this picture of sort of this chaotic place and darkness and disarray, and God's Spirit is hovering. The word hover is the idea of brooding. It's a term or a Hebrew word that of a mother hen kind of rustling her wings often before she would lay eggs. It was a brooding over. It was like it was about to give forth life, and it's this sort of rustle, like, I don't know how chicken sounds, but you get the idea. And it's like something's about to burst forth. And so the Spirit is over this darkness, is over this chaos. So imagine this is like you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I don't know what's supposed to happen. And the Spirit's just like brooding over you. And he's like just calling something into existence. Like this is the way God works. So back in Genesis, this is what happens. Here's the timeline. Day one, God says, let there be what? You know this. Let there be light. And guess what there was? There was light, and it's interesting. He separated the light from the dark. He creates this spatial awareness. Day two, it says that he separated the vaults above from the vaults below. This was the waters, and he created the sky, and he created the sea. Day three, it says that he said, this is all Hebrew language. He separated, he divided the water so that land emerged, and he created the land on day three. Then days 4, 5, and 6, he goes back and he fills all the things he had created, separated the day from the night, day 1. Day 4, what does he do? He puts the moon, the lesser light, and the larger light to govern the day and the night, to govern them. He establishes time and seasons, things that begin and things that end. Right, this is important for us to see. This is all created order. This is the ordering of things. Day 5, he fills what he did on day 2. The birds and the fish, they go in the sea and the air, you get this. And then day 6. Day 6 is the pinnacle of all this. And he creates all the land animals. And then at the top of the very, sort of piece de resistance, right? He creates human beings. And he gives them a job description in chapter 27 and 28. This is like, have you ever been to a new job? You do orientation, you show up and say, here's what your job is gonna be. They give you your Chick-fil-A name tag and your uniform, all that stuff. This is what it was on day 6. It's their orientation. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And then God blessed them and he said to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. They get their job description. Their job description is to do what? To exercise dominion, to rule and to reign and to create and to contribute with God in what he is doing in the process as you are. One of the things that you've got to understand as a college student, or at least as a younger adult, is that this is about creation and contribution. This is about beautiful and offering ourselves. All those things are a part of this. You offer what you have where you are, right? The one thing that you can rest assured is God does not need you to be somewhere else other than where you are, and he does not need you to be someone else other than who you are. It took me 15 years to get this. I always thought if I were more like this person or that person, then I'd be more useful to God. If I had that skill or that gift or that thing, then I'd be more useful to God. And what I had to learn is that God created me and he intended me to be a particular way. And I've got to be allegiant to him and I've got to be surrendered to him and all those things, but he doesn't need for me to be someone else. He doesn't need you to be someone else. All the things that you think are wacky about you or wrong about you or whatever it is, he doesn't need you to be somebody else. He wants to bring you and your contribution and to bring what you create and bring to bear on the world around us. This is the commission for human beings. So what's really interesting is the ordering of this. So human beings show up on day 6. They get this great job description. On day 7, Genesis chapter 2, the next chapter, thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all of their vast array. All the work was done. And by the 7th day, God had finished his work, all the work that he had been doing. And so on the 7th day, he rested from all of this work. Then God blessed the 7th day and he made it holy because on it, he rested from all the work that he had done. That's a beautiful passage, and that's the introduction of the Sabbath, the creation of the Sabbath, right there in the creation narrative. What's fascinating about this, day 6, you get your job description. You're all fired up to go to work. What happens on your first day of work? What's your job? Rest. Rest. It's like the first day of work, you're supposed to take a break. Like this is the very first day of us showing up, right? To do this. Now I know we've got like the name of the animals, all the things that happen, but this is the created orders. That rest is the pinnacle, but it's also the beginning point of our participation in God's. In fact, this ordering would get placed into the way in which the Hebrew calendar would operate. What you and I do, our days look like this. Put this up there, Megan. Our days look something like this, right? So I drew like the day, right? It's midnight, noon, 6 a.m. Sun rises somewhere around 6:15, 6:20 right now, I think. And then sun sets somewhere around 6:50, right? You with me? And so what we do, we get up at sunrise. How many of you guys get up at sunrise? Anybody get up at sunrise? How many of you guys get up at 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Where you go. So wherever you get up somewhere over here, right? And you get up, and what do, man? You go to work, right? You grind. You get up, you go to the gym, you go to class, you do whatever it is you do, and you work, and you work, and you work. And some of you work jobs, and then you go to school, or some of you go to school, and then you go to work, and whatever it is that you do, but you work. And some of you, man, you're so driven, you don't get off at sunset or you don't get off at 7. You work right because you burn the midnight oil and you think, man, this is like a badge of honor. This is something good. And then when you're done, you crash. And what we think is that this is what rest is. Rest is like, I'm dead for like 4 hours. I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it again. This is why they call it the grind. The Hebrew day was different. The ordering of the Hebrew day started like this, right? So you have the same kind of idea, midnight, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Well, the Hebrew day began at sunset on the day before. Are you following this? So like right now, it's Tuesday night at 8:30. It's actually Wednesday. It's Wednesday. It's already Wednesday. Now we're at Overflow, I get it. And you're gonna go get pizza or ice cream, whatever it is you do after Overflow. But sometime tonight, right, the whole idea is that you're gonna rest. The whole ordering begins, our activity begins with rest. And then we wake up and we join God in what he has already been doing. Do you know why people can't sleep? Because you worry about all the things that you didn't get done during the day or all the things that have to get done tomorrow. As we stay up all night long and we're worried. The gift of sleep is you get to go to sleep and check out and know that the world is gonna be just fine without you contributing anything to it. That is a freeing thing. To go to sleep and realize that if I don't do something for 8 hours, I'll wake up, things are gonna be, you know what you're doing? You're trusting. You're saying that your worry and your effort and your things aren't actually contributing the things that they're contributing something, but not what you think you're contributing. Because you think that if you can work and control and make this happen, then you'll be more in control of your life. And what God is doing is saying, can you trust me? Can you trust me? Can you trust me? And what this posture is for us to rest and then rise to join God in what he's already been doing in his work. Right? We contribute and cooperate with him. So think about this, right? He's already doing things in and around you and through you. He's got things that he intends for you, and he can work them out in 10,000 different ways, with or without your input. And the posture is, right, just because you can't figure out how he's gonna do something, has no capacity on his ability to do it. And what we're learning is we're learning how to trust. The point of the Sabbath, the point of rest, isn't to recover, it's to trust. To rest is to say, Lord, I'm not going to do things because I'm going to trust you. That's the essence of the Sabbath. This is back in the agricultural days, right? If you didn't till the garden, I'm not a farmer, but if you didn't work in the garden, then work didn't get done, and God's going, that's right, that's my point. Can you trust me to take care of this while you're not doing it? It's always, always, always about trust. It's learning how to live in his presence so you can learn how to live out of his presence. And a lot of times we get all of this backwards and reversed, and it's a function of trust. God, this is the thing that I've probably learned to take more solace in than anything else. And that is, I have just learned not to freak out about everything that I want to freak out about, which is a lot. And the reason is because I have learned that there are so many times in so many places where I couldn't figure out how this is gonna happen. And I had worked and worked and worked, and God did it in the most unbelievably mind-blowing way. And I just never saw it coming. And it looks all along like you knew what you were doing the whole time, and you didn't. It's just when you cooperate, you learn how to live out of his presence. You know, people ask, you know, Mike, how did all this happen? And I don't know. I don't know how it happened. I know we did some things well. I know we did some dumb things. But I think I've shared this with you before. I share it with our congregation all the time. But then my commitment was to learn how to live a life of long obedience in the same direction. To just be committed to every single day, to try to, Lord, can I surrender to you today? And I'll tell you, those started with fits and starts when I was your age. And over 10, 15, 20, 25 years, it has gotten to be like life-giving to me. So here's how I want to close our time today, tonight, today, tomorrow. We're going to pretend it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, okay? The sun's already gone down. Are you with me? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rest. We're going to rest. And what this means is you have to begin to posture yourself to rest, which means you're going to have to fight all the things that pop into your head and pop into your mind and try to distract you and make your list, all those things. And one of the practices that I've learned to practice is I try to practice being still until I actually want to be still. And that takes sometimes a long time. Because I'm fast and I have a lot of ideas. My mind runs in a million different directions. Matthew chapter 11, it's a familiar verse, but it's a beautiful invitation. And so what I want us to do is I want us to really think that we're beginning tomorrow. It's beginning Wednesday. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna rest and we're gonna posture ourselves before the Lord. We're gonna order ourselves in the way of life that is consistent with what God intends. Does that make sense? Right now, we're just gonna order ourselves in a way that's consistent with what God intends. Call it on earth as he intends for it to be, as it is in heaven. This is what it looks like. We're gonna believe it, we're gonna trust it, we're gonna enter into it. And so what I want for you to do is I'll put Matthew on the screen, and I want us to just use this and hear his invitation to you to begin your day today. So when you go home tonight and you close your eyes after you've done all, I get you got things to do, but after you've done that, you close your eyes. This is what I want you to feel and sense as we learn how to practice this. It's interesting, the chapter after this is where Jesus says he's Lord of the Sabbath, but here's what he says. Matthew chapter 28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Man, if this isn't giving us insight into who God is, the very embodiment saying, I am gentle and I am humble in heart, and I'm inviting you to show up here. What is the promise? I will do what? I will give you rest for your soul. I mean, how many of you need soul rest? Like you need everything that you feel just to wash away from you. You need it to be carried or held. He tells us to take up his yoke. This is language of work. This is language of cooperation, of being with him. The thing that I love about this is the invitation is beautiful. What's the invitation? What is it? Is it on there still? Put it up there. What's the first three words? Come. Just show up. Even if you're weary, even if you're tired, even if you're worn out, even if you're unsure, even if you can't figure out how things are gonna work, you show up. What's his promise to you when you do that? You'll find rest. You'll find rest. A lot of us are trying to recover. We're trying to find ways to recover from what has happened. And Jesus invites you to come just like you are. You know what I love about this? You know what the promise is? I'm gentle, take my yoke upon you. And what's the next line? And you can say it out loud. Learn from me. You know what that means? He assumes that we haven't figured it all out yet. And we've got some things we need to learn. That is a beautiful invitation. It's a beautiful invitation. For I'm gentle and humble in heart, and in my presence, you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When you feel pressure, especially the pressure to know what you're supposed to do, the job you're supposed to take, whether you're supposed to do this, the one thing that's gonna pull you faster than anything is if you can figure out how to make this work and do something about it. That's gonna be the single most tempting thing that you can do. To calculate and to figure and to manipulate and to force, and you will wear yourself out. Do you trust that God can faithfully lead you to whatever it is that he would like for you to do? Do you believe that? If so, the invitation is you come, all who've been trying to do this another way, and learn from him and walk with him. Eugene Peterson says it like this: learn to live in the unforced rhythms of grace, and you will recover the life for which you have been intended to live. Father, as we begin tomorrow, we want to begin it in your presence. God, would you remind us that tomorrow not only has enough trouble of its own, but that you are also the Lord of tomorrow. And that you will already be orchestrating and preparing and cultivating soil and things for us to participate in tomorrow. And that tonight when we close our eyes, we can rest in that reality. Father, would you let us remain in your presence for a few minutes tonight? That we can learn how to live out of your presence tomorrow. At the end of the day, that we hear you whisper and say, well done, good and faithful work today. And we would find your grace to be sufficient to rest and then to rise again, to join you in the work that you have long since begun. God, what a beautiful picture. We lift this in the name of your son, Jesus, who is our King.